If you struggle with keeping things in scale and proportion in your animal drawings, I have an easy way to get your animals scaled from the get-go, and the only extra tool you'll need is a ruler. So today we'll be outlining the shape of this young bull moose reference image I took in Isle Royale National Park. Now if you want to follow along with me, there is a link in the description where you can download this photo. Okay, so this method is basically measuring all these different points in the moose so we can then transfer to our drawing and keep everything in scale and proportion. So the first step is outlining the entire moose body. So what I'm going to do is just measure from the backside here, and we're going to say it just goes up to where the moose's neck begins. So we're going to go about 7 inches. So on our drawing now, we're just going to mark out 7 inches. Now don't be like me here. Make sure the back side of your ruler is clean so it doesn't leave smudges like I am here. Now I'm making these lines quite a bit darker than I normally would. That's just because I want it to show up really well on camera. I'm also going to mark the center of our 7 inches at the 3.5 inch mark. So knowing that we have 7 inches for our full hind to neck, this is a halfway mark. So next I'm going to measure the moose's belly, which is around 3.125 inches. So we're going to come over here and mark that off. Next I'm just going to measure from the center of the back here to about the center of this hump. So about 1 3/4 inches, and then to the top of the hump is about 3/4 inches. So we're just slowly transferring all those measurements over to our drawing, and then we can start sketching in how all those connect, knowing that the scale and proportions are going to be accurate. Now when drawing animals, it's particularly crucial to get your initial shape accurate. Otherwise, things can go south really quickly, and people who view your drawing will easily notice anything that looks out of whack. So again, with the 7 inch mark of our moose being right here, the hump comes down a little bit and then starts to go back up to the head at about the 7 inch mark. So you just keep continuing on like that, figuring out all those distances. So we got the center of our hump here. Now let's go to the center of the moose's face, which is at just short of 2.5. We'll say 2 3/8. Transfer that over here, 2 3/8. This is going to be what we're considering just about center of the eyes. So from where we marked the center of the moose's head is just short of 7/8 to the top. So to the bottom of the moose's head is just a little above 1.5 inches. So now we have the full length of the moose's head figured out. We figure out the width. We'll go right by the eyes where we have our little hash mark, which is just above 1.125 inches. Now be sure here to note on your ruler your center mark just above 1/2 inch there. Center that up and then just make a little line like that, 1.125 inch. So now with the length and width measured, we can start outlining in the shape of our moose's head. Don't get too caught up in tiny little details here. Remember, we're just getting the scale and proportion accurate here. Figuring out the details and really locking in the shape is when you are going back and finessing everything. And despite this looking like you're supposed to center it off this moose's head is not perfectly centered. So don't try to make this as like it's centered in any way. So going back to what we did initially, the 7 inch mark here, let's just go back here and put a line where that was. So the bottom of the moose's head here will connect, and you can just rough in that line. So you can see how we're just slowly transferring all these accurate measurements to keep our drawing in scale and proportion so that when we go back and finesse all these details, we can do it with confidence. So I'm going to continue on and do the legs and body here of the moose. Now this method can be particularly helpful when you want to scale up a reference image. So let's say you wanted to scale this moose 5 times larger. You would just multiply all of your measurements by 5. It's a lot easier for those proportions to get out of sorts And if you've already added a lot of detail, it can be a real punch in the gut. You can also use this method to scale down your image, of course. You would just reduce your measurements by whatever percentage you're trying to scale down. One area that this method can be super helpful on is working through all those facial features to make sure they are proportionally accurate. So let's start with the moose's ear here. You can see that is about an inch off of this top right sort of quadrant of our sketch here. Now, we haven't really worked in the details quite yet, but you can see the moose's skull pokes out a little bit here, and that's really where this ear starts. So poke that out a little bit, and we'll just draw a line in. Let's do the other ear here. It's a little bit hidden, but you can see we got that same piece of the moose's skull poking out of this left quadrant. We'll just sort of rough that in somewhere in that neighborhood. And so measuring that out, we're at about 7/8 of an inch. So if you want to, you could just rough in your ear shape from there, but if you want to take it even further, you could measure the width as well. It's just short of a 1/2 inch. Do the same on the other side. This one is a little bigger at just over a 1/2 inch. And so now we can add these ears in, knowing that they're proportionally accurate. We can continue on with these antlers that are starting to come in here. This one on the left here is just about 3/4 of an inch. And since we have this ear proportionally accurate here, I'm just going to use that as my sort of starting point for this 3/4 of an inch. I could measure the width going this way here, but I feel pretty confident in just roughing this in. Let's take away our previous outline. Let's get the other one here. So this antler is a little short of 7/8 of an inch. So we're at about right here. So something about in that area. So now I'm just going to rough that in. Erase our reference line there. I'm going to add a few more guiding lines here for scale and proportion just as examples. But the good thing about this method is you can measure out as many spots as you need that you're struggling with. Now you will need a semi-decent reference image to do this method. If it's too small, it might be tough to measure. So it'll probably take a little bit of practice to figure out how to connect all these measurements together and scale out your animal. But once you get the hang of it, it's really as simple as that. And now with our moose scaled and in proportion, we can begin to fill in our details with confidence. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.